Hey everyone, as you've heard, I am Brooke Brown, Miss Wheelchair Arizona 2022. My platform is always assume competence. You hear more about that in a minute. I was also third runner-up for Miss Wheelchair America 2023 this past August. I was born with cerebral palsy, so even though I'm fully able to speak, my speech tends to be a little difficult to understand. That's why I'm using an augmented communication app on my phone. I also have my cousin, Michaela, who is my assistant, here with me to help clarify my speech for your questions. Besides my current title, I am the Arizona State Coordinator for Miss Wheelchair America and an ambassador for United Cerebral Palsy of Central Arizona. I also run a Christian creative storytelling services ministry called Brooke's Butterfly Touch. The purpose of the ministry is to help people who have disabilities or who are facing some kind of adversity learn how to tell their story. As part of the ministry, I teach workshops, speak in schools, churches, and at other events such as like this. Along with that, I have published 3 books. The first one is The Little Butterfly Girl, which is a fairy tale loosely based on my childhood struggles, daydreams, and faith. The second book is a devotional Bible study called Adapt, which is designed to help people discover God's purpose for their gifts as well as their limitations. The third book is called Transforming the Heart of Your Story. It is a workbook meant to help others learn how to tell their own stories in a positive way to promote hope and healing from hardship. I use the workbook as the curriculum for the storytelling workshops that I teach. Aside from my own ministry, I volunteer with Joni and Friends Arizona and also led a biblical support group for adults with physical disabilities through Highlands Church in Scottsdale. I feel blessed and beyond grateful to have the honor of being the first keynote speaker for this coalition. It's even more significant than you may know because the very first public speech I ever gave was here at my graduation ceremony on December 15, 2006. In fact, most of the work I do has its roots here at Arizona State. Case in point, there was a mix-up with my schedule during my final semester, and instead of frantically searching for a replacement class, my favorite professor took me on for an independent study. When I told her I wanted to do something with this story, it started over break. She allowed me to finish writing the first draft of what became The Little Butterfly Girl with the condition that this was still a journalism project, so I couldn't stop at writing it. I had to figure how to pique people's reading it. So with some guidance, I learned how to put up a website and let people see who I was. It was the first time I'd ever written any of my real story in my own voice and not through a character. Let me tell you, that was scary. But it taught me that sharing my experiences in my own voice is just as impactful as all the other people I wrote stories about. Majoring in journalism fueled my passion for and taught me the best techniques in telling people's stories. I know a lot of journalism majors love to chase the glory of breaking the next big story, but for me, the most important thing was always finding the people involved and allowing them to be heard. I've always been extremely aware of what it feels like not to be heard due to my speech impairment. Writing has always been my ways of combating people's assumptions, breaking down barriers, and teaching others to always assume competence before I even knew that phrase. It was about a month before graduation that I received the news that my wonderful professor mentioned earlier nominated me for the Walter Cronkite Outstanding Undergraduate Award. Not only was the nomination accepted, the award committee chose me out of the 3 recipients to be the student speaker at the ceremony. Giving that graduation speech was one of the most gratifying and humbling, yet terrifying experiences in my life. On one hand, I didn't feel worthy of the award. not living on campus and having to work around my assistants' schedules made it too difficult to join any of the student journalist associations and things that are usually criteria. But I was able to showcase my gifts where it counted. I had an internship at Get Out, which was the entertainment magazine published every weekend by the East Valley Tribune. My editors were so pleased with my work that several of my articles were run in the main paper. Graduation was also the first time I used an augmentative communication device to speak to a big group. I was really nervous about how it would be received, but I was surprised by a standing ovation. I share all this with you to say that the best advice I can give you as college students with disabilities is to invest your energy in developing your strengths and abilities within your limitations. Don't compare yourself to your classmates. Trust that you were created for a unique purpose. I used to say that my only bone to pick with him was my speech, but my experience over the last couple of years has made me rethink that. If I didn't have the voice that I have, I would not be here speaking to you today. It's true what he says in John 9 about the blind man. His power can be seen through our weakness is therefore my speech is my power and part of my ministry to encourage others in their struggles. It's the trials I've endured on this journey have taught me one thing, it's that the best way to build relationships, cultivate fulfilling opportunities, and advocate for positive change in our communities is to share our stories with one another. At any given moment, one typically abled person will begin communicating with another under the automatic assumption that the other can comprehend everything being said. However, this is not always true when a typically abled person endeavors to engage someone with a disability. Culture has conditioned people to incorrectly assume there is an automatic correlation between one's physical limitations and mental competency. This perception needs to change urgently. As an example, it took me 6 years to win my title because during 2 of my 3 previous pageants as a contestant, my ability to fulfill the stated goal of Miss Wheelchair Arizona was discounted because of my speech impairment. The judges weren't willing to let go of their preconceived notions of the perfectly spoken title holder and really listen to my story or see the value in my background. In fact, after I competed for the first time and lost a T-breaker, I was told point blank that I wasn't chosen because the judges assumed my speech impairment would hinder me from doing well at nationals. I was deeply offended and quite frankly appalled at that way of thinking. Just because my voice sounds different from other title holders doesn't mean people won't be encouraged by listening to my story, and my mission won't have a positive impact on the disabled community. This is the reason I titled my platform, Always Assume Competence. As you know, no one should ever avoid communicating with someone else simply because their body mechanics are unfamiliar. A typically able person should strive to approach a person with a disability the same way they would any other, get to know them by asking questions, seeking out common interests, and listening to their experiences. If cognitive challenges do become apparent, find out what accommodations need to be made. Even many of those with cognitive limitations can sense when someone is being patronizing. As my friend Missy, who happens to be the disability ministry director at Highlands Church, always asks in her volunteer trainings, a typically able person making the presumption that a person with a disability can understand everything said to and happening around them when they really can't. Or someone noticing another person's disability and jumping to conclusion that their physical limitations automatically makes them not cognitively aware. We are all created in God's image. He has given each of us specific gifts for a dedicated purpose, regardless of disability, as it states in 1 Peter, and that makes us all worthy of human dignity and meaningful communication. Throughout the history of humanity, There has always been one dominant form of communication by which we interact, and that is telling stories. We all do it every day, several times a day. Everyone at any age, in any condition or circumstance can appreciate a good story. I strongly believe that this is true because on some level every person wants to be acknowledged, accepted, and treated as equal by society at large, no matter how they may protest otherwise. This is especially true for those of us in the disabled community. It's the most basic principle behind the universal access movement, which strives to provide access to all public facilities to all people on all mobility levels. Some able-bodied people describe people with disabilities as having special needs, but different does not constitute special. We are not asking for anything more than what's equal. Equal care, equal respect. I know that as members of this vibrant and ever-growing community, we are passionate about our shared goals. And in my opinion, the most effective way to initiate the positive advancements in equality for which we are always advocating is to change the perceptions of our able-bodied peers on a personal level, telling one story at a time. With each unique story will come greater mutual understanding, which leads to more open doors for new opportunities. People must acknowledge the competency of the people advocating change before change will happen. The challenge of finding common ground starts with dispelling another's misguided assumptions. To do this, we must work to let others see our individual characters at all times. Each person's story is different, and so are the ways it can be told. I share my own stories in many various forms, each one as intensely personal as the next. For example, I'm able to connect with those that watch me dance for duplets by explaining that while I have to rely on my power chair for my general mobility, I still enjoy being physically active and pushing the limits of my body. Similarly, anyone who reads my written work will quickly realize I have many of the same thought processes, emotions, desires, and goals as any other 30-something able-bodied woman, even though my speech may be difficult to understand. On that note, I want to leave you with one last encouragement. As much as you work to teach others to always assume competence, remember to always assume competence in yourself. I know a lot of people tell us what we can't do because of our disabilities, but I can tell you from my own experience, your limitations will often become your greatest strength and where you find your purpose in life. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to answer any questions. Nothing is off limits. If you are interested in any of my books, I am offering a student discount of 50% off any book or $20 for all 3 books. I can take Apple Pay, PayPal, Cash App, credit cards, and cash. My social media can be found on my business card and brochure. Also, any female wheelchair users 21 and over should consider competing for Miss Wheelchair Arizona 2023 in January. I have information if you are interested. Now, any questions?